Okay, Chair Bishop, we are at quorum, so we can go ahead and get started.
Great, thank you. And thank you, everyone. Welcome. I'm excited to see a number of faces, and I know we had some conflict with our board and some of the commissioners due to the rigors of legislative session right now, but thank you all for joining us that can be here, and thank you to the public that is tuning in as well too. So thanks to both the commissioners and our public members for showing up today for the board. We've got a full agenda, and I want to start by adoption of the consent agenda and our minutes from our last meeting, our February meeting minutes. So I will call to order the meeting of the Environmental Quality Board, and I'd like to start with a motion on the adoption of the consent agenda and minutes. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? All those opposed, same sign. Hearing no opposition, the motion carries and the consent agenda and meeting minutes are adopted. So welcome. I want to start by doing a roll call. I'm Laura Bishop, the EQB Chair and Commissioner of the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. So roll call, Margaret Anderson Kelleher, MnDOT.
Present.
Great. Commissioner Grace Arnold, Department of Commerce.
Present.
Kristen Eide Tollefson, Public Member from Congressional District 2.
I'm here, thank you.
Thank you. Alan Forsberg, Public Member CD1. I don't think he's here. Julie Garing, Public Member CD7.
Oops, present.
Okay. Kevin McKinnon, Deputy Commissioner Deed, proxy for Steve Grow.
Present.
Thank you. Mehmet Connor Steenberg, Public Member from CD5.
Yes, present.
Thank you. Dan Huff, Department of Health, proxy for Jan Malcolm. I don't think Dan could be here today. Nicholas Martin, Nick, Public Member from Congressional District 4.
Yes, here. Thanks, Commissioner Bishop.
Okay, thank you. Brian Murdoch, Public Member CD8.
Present.
Excellent. Commissioner Tom Peterson, Department of Agriculture.
Here for now.
Okay, thank you very much. Alice Roberts Davis, Commissioner, Department of Administration. Okay, not here. Commissioner Sarah Stroman, Department of Natural Resources.
I, like Commissioner Peterson, am here for now, and Assistant Commissioner Jess Richards will attend starting at about 2 o'clock as my proxy.
Great, thank you. Gerald Van Amberg, Chair of Bowser, you here?
Present. Present.
Great. Thank you, Jerry. Benjamin Yawaki, Public Member from CD3.
Present.
Great. Hi, Ben. Welcome.
Hello.
And Council Member Suvento from the Met Council, proxy for Charlie Zellich.
I'm here. Thank you. Present.
Great. Thank you. I believe then we have a quorum. And I'll turn it back to you, Katie Pratt, to give some updates and run through logistics for today's meeting.
Great. Thank you, Chair Bishop. Good afternoon, board members and members of the public. My name is Katie Pratt. I'm the Executive Director with Environmental Quality Board. And I have just a couple announcements, and then I'm going to walk you through the logistics of today's meeting. So first of all, as you can see up on the screen, we wanted to remind you that we are accepting applications for a public board member from the 6th Congressional District. So the 6th District, you can see there on the map, includes central Minnesota and up through St. Cloud. And we really encourage you, if you know folks who reside in this district who might be interested in the board and be interested in serving, please do encourage them to apply. We'll be looking at applications through the end of April and into early May. So please encourage people in your networks to apply. Denise, if you can switch to the next slide. There is additional information about the board positions. There's kind of an FAQ page on our website under the About section. So that's a good place to direct people if they want information about what it means to serve on the board, or by all means, people can reach out to me directly to get their questions answered. So thanks for helping us recruit for that board member position. Okay, next slide, Denise. The second thing I wanted to announce is just get you all very excited for our May board meeting, which is going to be a little bit different format. So we are joining in May with the Climate Change Subcabinet, and we'll be holding a joint meeting, but it's going to be hosted by a group of youth. We call them the EELs, the Emerging Environmental Leaders, that we have been working with over the past months to help us plan this meeting. And they're just a great group of talented young folks who are going to run us through a meeting and talk about climate change from their perspectives, and they're calling it Our Realities and Our Futures. So I think it's going to just be a great event, and we hope you can join us. It'll be during the evening, so May 19th, which is our regular board meeting time, but from 6 to 8 p.m. We'll be meeting virtually, and watch our social media and our website for more information and details to join us on that. Great. Okay, so those are my two announcements, and then next slide, Denise. Just wanted to talk you through what to expect for the duration of our meeting today. We do have a pretty full agenda. We have 4 informational items that we'll be discussing. Just really quickly, those 4 items are, first, we'll be hearing from Aditya Ranade of the Department of Commerce. He'll be giving some highlights of their 2020 Quadrennial Energy Report that was released not long ago. And it's just a fascinating report that gives us insight into Minnesota's energy sector and really relates to issues of climate change and sustainability that the board thinks about quite a lot. So we look forward to hearing that. Second, we will hear from EQB staff member Eric Cedarleaf Dahl. He's going to give us just a very brief overview of a project that EQB will be working on in 2021, which is a mandatory category report. You'll learn, if you don't know what that is, you're going to learn about it in a few minutes. It's something that we are required to do and deliver to the legislature in December. The third agenda item is hearing from another EQB staff member, Rebecca Gutierrez Moreno, who will give us some highlights from preliminary results from the Pollinator survey that was out earlier this year. So they got a wealth of information and feedback via that survey, and wanted to fill you all in on what we're hearing so far. And then last but not least, we'll be hearing from staff member Katrina Hapka of the Environmental Review Program, and she's going to be talking through some of the data that we collect on the Environmental Review Program and giving you some highlights about this past year of 2020. So very packed agenda. Hope you all have some snacks, a cup of coffee. Hopefully we'll have some good discussion. Now, members of the public, because we do have such a full board agenda today, we wanted to make sure that we have, sorry for a slight interruption there. I have a unexpected child who's distance learning this week, so she's in the background. But we have such a full agenda today that we wanted to make sure we prioritize public comment at the beginning of the meeting, also because we do have some conflicts with legislative schedules today. So wanted to make sure we get your comments and your feedbacks in right away. So if you're interested in making public comment today, please do use the chat function on WebEx and let us know that you'd like to make a public comment. We will take those comments in the order with that they're received. So please chat your name in there. We do want to let you know too that we will need to close public comment after 30 minutes today to move on with our agenda items. So we ask that out of respect for your fellow commenters that you try to keep your comments succinct. You know, we recommend no more than 3 minutes and shorter if you can, so that we can hear from everybody today. Once we do close public comment, we also have another way for you to participate throughout the meeting, and this is open right now. Denise, if you can move us to the next slide. And that is a Slido platform. This is something we've been using in recent meetings. We're using it today almost like a chat feature. But what Slido allows us to do is capture any comments and ideas that you want to contribute here online, and we can export those and they become part of the public record. So we will include any comments that you make via Slido in our public record and in our next agenda, in our next board meeting packet. The details and the information for accessing Slido are there on the screen. You can also, they'll also be sent out in the chat, but basically you can use your phone or another web browser window and type in slido.com and put in our code for today, which is EQB-APR21. And it'll take you to an ideas forum where you can type in ideas, comments that you might have. Board members, I really encourage you, if you can multitask, to log in as well and follow along and hear what folks are saying. Because of the timing of today's meeting, we may not have time to address all of your comments directly, but like I said, we'll be reading along and these do become part of the public record. And the other thing I would just ask with Slido is, in this virtual world that we're living in, please help us foster a respectful virtual forum, keeping your Slido comments constructive and really focused on the issues that the board is grappling with. Okay, so that's Slido. And then finally, if you do have a longer comment that doesn't fit well into the Slido forum, know that you can submit written comments to EQB at any time to include as part of our record, our public record. Those are the logistics for the day. If you have logistical questions about this, about Slido or anything, you can also use the chat function to ask those logistical questions. And with that, I will turn it back to Chair Bishop to kick off the first agenda item.
Great. Well, thank you so much. So we will have a public input period and welcome any commentators. So Giuseppe is going to work on that to cue the commentators as well. So with that piece, I think our first, do I want to just go straight to our first agenda item, which is the quadrennial energy report, Katie?
Yeah, so thank you, Chair Bishop. We'll actually
Or do you want me to walk through those procedures? I think you've walked through a lot of them.
Yep, I think I covered most of them. So I think we can just open up the public comment period at this point. And
okay, good.
Giuseppe, Giuseppe, do we have folks in the queue looking
so let's open up that public comment period, and Giuseppe, if you want to queue any commenters, after about 25 minutes, we will be closing that comment period. You can tune into Slido, board members, so make sure you're doing that as well.
Good afternoon.
Does everybody? Okay, go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Giuseppe, and I do have one person who indicated that they'd like to make a comment, and that's Debbie Keene-Stone. So Debbie, if you could introduce yourself, you are now unmuted.
And does everyone have access to the Slido? Are they looking at that either on their phones or on the computer as we're speaking? Just from the board members, just making certain that we have that. Okay. Okay. Sorry, Giuseppe, I just wanted to make sure, but go ahead. Giuseppe again. Who do we have?
So that's first I have Debbie Keene-Stone, and Debbie, you're unmuted and you should be able to make a comment.
Thank you very much. As you noted, my name is Debbie Queenstone. I want to thank you for the opportunity to address this group this afternoon. I wanted to draw your attention to a project that's going on in the northwest portion of the state in Roselle County. My grandparents, as well as other Roselle County immigrants, homesteaded land, farmland, in the early 1900s, arriving in covered wagons in most cases. Farming in that area of the state is a way of life. It's something we've always known, and we're worried about the threat that faces us. Over the last several years, we became aware that the DNR has been planning a large project with negligible public benefit that would take many thousands of acres of land. We have more than 50 farmers in the area and many thousands of acres at risk. We have banded together to form a landowner coalition to allow us to participate in the discussion of the planning by the DNR and the local watershed staff on what they call the Rosa Lake Restoration Project. The project really, for all intents and purposes, is a very expensive shallow marsh that they want to create. This afternoon, I wanted to just make 3 points to discuss a little bit more with you about the project. We need help saving our farms from flooding. We also need help in bringing transparency and accountability to the regulatory process, and in requiring, my apologies, we wanted to also talk with you about the importance of requiring an environmental impact statement, which is a very actionable item and what we think is a very critical step to help with the first 2 priorities that we've laid out. Point number 1, the Rosa Lake project risks flooding a number of farms in the area, and essentially every farmer and every landowner in the project footprint is opposed to the project. As one small example, the project dikes that are projected to be about 2 feet higher than the existing dikes on our farmlands, meaning that when the flooding does happen, water will spill over onto the lands with lower dikes in those places. That's our farmland. So instead of the water draining into the basement, or as we like to call it, our safety net, like it does now, it'll inundate our farmland with water and destroy our crops. It's been our word against the engineers with little data to back up the engineers' statements. At this month's watershed district meeting in Roseau, the watershed board engineer acknowledged for the first time that he has concerns about flooding based on the comment letter our coalition provided on the operational plan. Our point number 2 is that we're extremely concerned about the lack of transparency and accountability throughout the entire regulatory process governing the Rosa Lake project. On the day-to-day parts of the project, meetings have been held with very poor sound quality for online or call-in listeners. The public is seldom given adequate notice. For bigger issues, the problems are worse. The local watershed board heard and voted to adopt an operating plan during the same meeting, all without any public input or consultation from the project work team or landowners in the project's footprint. The watershed board is also keeping the project work team completely cut off from conversations and discussions surrounding the maintenance plan. We believe this behavior is all in violation of the 1998 mediation agreement, which the watershed board should have to follow if they are relying indeed on flood hazard mitigation grants per section 103F.161 of the Minnesota statutes. Our final point, number 3, is finally, the project is substantial and risky enough to warrant an EIS, an environmental impact statement. However, we are concerned that we may be denied the EIS because the DNR is listed as both the project proposer and the responsible government unit, the RGU, for the EIS determination. The watershed board already voted to change the project dramatically during the EAW public comment period with no adjustment to the schedule other than the timing. which has resulted in a delay in the EIS determination decision. A positive EIS determination is essential to ensuring that the DNR and the Watershed Board truly understand the cost, the study, and the benefits of the project in light of so much public opposition. Too much is at stake for all of us, and we asked for your help. For us, we have been at this for over 5 years. We have begged to be part of the conversation. We've begged to be allowed into the room. When we have, we've been admitted by conference call with very, very poor accommodations that make it almost impossible for us to participate. And we believe the cost of this project will be great. It will be great to local economic development. It will be life-altering for the 50 family landowners and affected people as part of this project. We don't understand fully the regulatory process. It's complex and it's been fairly obscured for us. We're hopeful that the board here might be able to help us with that piece. What we do understand from reading the 1998 mitigation agreement requirements is that from our view of what's gone on over the last 5 years, these absolutely have not been followed. And we are really hoping that there's a champion amongst you that might be able to help us see our way through this very, very difficult time for our families. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thanks for sharing your concerns. I know that Commissioner Stroman from the DNR is on this line and maybe wants to respond on some of this to what you can. Sarah, are you open to responding?
Yes, Chair Bishop, and maybe I would characterize it less as a response, but just providing some additional information to help the board and the commenter understand the DNR's role. And I will first of all, thank you for raising the issue. These are complex projects, particularly when they're big projects that have multiple goals. And I think as members of the EQB know, like similar to many of these large complex projects, there is a range of perspectives among Minnesotans about these projects. And so it is one of the reasons that I think the regulatory process and the environmental review process specifically is so important, so that there is and transparent process to look at potential environmental effects of such projects. So what I will add about this particular process is that the DNR is the RGU for this project. And so it is something that our environmental review unit is working on. They are still in process of making that final determination, partly because, as was just shared with us, there has been a change in the project, and that came midstream. And so I think, as we can all understand, when there is a change in the project, we have to go back and look at the assessment and make sure we wouldn't look at the potential for environmental effects differently based on those changes. We want to make sure that the flood modeling that was provided is still accurate. Again, to the point that our guest has made here, and that modeling is not simple, right? It's complex, and so it does take some time to go back through that and make sure that all of that information is still relevant to the projects as it stands today. So we do expect to have a determination by summer, and that is on track to be completed within the extension that we've given for this project.
Could I just follow up with one more question?
Sure, please, go ahead.
I guess, herein lies the issue, right? The DNR is not only planning this project, helping to appropriate funds that have been put aside for the project, but they're also deciding the fate of the project. And helping to marshal what the acceptance of the project and the process looks like going forward. As a landowner, and really the complete blatant disregard for our role in a project that so heavily affects us, it's shocking to me. And I guess we're very concerned about this extension in the determination. Since they made the extension, they have rammed through an operational plan outside of any sort of process. And they're doing the same with a maintenance plan that has financial burden impacts. And honestly, no one understands any of the details of this project well enough, including the elected local officials, have no technical expertise to really understand what they're evaluating and voting on. It's shocking for us as constituents and landowners and people who've lived there our entire lives, that such a drastic decision could be made. And really, we're not given any details to look at. And what we have assessed on our own dime by hiring a professional hydrologist is that this will be catastrophic to our way of life, the crops we grow, and the schedule.
Chair Bishop, maybe I could offer that perhaps either I or someone from our staff could connect, because I think there is the role of the watershed district and there is the DNR, and I will admit I think there's reference to both here in the decisions, and so obviously I can't speak to the process that the watershed district is taking, but I think we can certainly help clarify what the role of the watershed district is versus the role of the DNR here, and maybe try to help make this complex project with lots of parties a little bit more transparent. So perhaps we can have some follow-up offline. Katie, I think that you can maybe provide my contact information.
I think that would be a good idea. And of course, we can circle back to just to get more background on the project. I know it's been talked about, but if board members are going to be interested in a little bit more of this too, just to get that background. And I know it gets frustrating to the public when the RGU is also the planner, and we've talked about that through the environmental review process. Some EQB might want to talk a little bit about how that happens, but under MIPA, but also might be a good thing for us as a board to understand a little bit better, especially as we go into a retreat sometime this summer and for coming up. But of course, this project is more immediate. So just getting that type of information from our team would be helpful as well.
And Chair Bishop, I'd be happy to also have our DNR environmental review team talk a little bit about that as well. It is not uncommon because of the type of work that we do in the land we manage, that we are often in the shoes of a project proposer, and we are not immune from the requirements of environmental review. So they are separate units within our department. I understand how it can cause confusion because we're one agency, and so if our staff can help explain that as well, we'd be more than happy to do that.
Great, thank you for that. Okay, thank you. And thanks to commenter for offering up her comments as well as concerns. Are there any other questions from the board?
Madam Chair, this is Kristen Eide Tollefson, and I was wondering if from Commissioner Stroman is if there's a dimension of mitigation that's involved, that maybe that would be something else to highlight. I'd have no idea because I have not seen the documents, but I wondered, because I'm assuming that some kind of mitigation is part of the environmental review process discussion. So that's my only comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone
Chair,
else?
Chair, this is member Mehmet Konar Steenberg. I wonder if there are other resources, written resources and so forth that can be shared with the concerned citizens, like the Citizens Handbook on the environmental review process and so forth. Perhaps they already have access to those, but if we could be proactive about providing those kinds of materials.
I'm not sure if it's appropriate for me to respond. I can tell you that we certainly benefit from anything that this group would think would be helpful to us. We really have gotten very, very little or almost no attention from the various stakeholders in this process. So we're definitely in a situation where we're looking for information and trying to figure out how best to move this conversation productively forward.
Okay. Yeah, and I'll look to the staff and follow up, but Denise and Katie, is there anything that, do we have a citizen's guide to environmental review? I mean, the complexity of it becomes challenging, I know, for our public. Do we have something like that?
Yeah, no, we don't have a document exactly like is being described, but we, I think some roles that EQB at the staff level can play is one is being that connector of helping connect this group with the right staff people and the right areas of expertise around our member agencies. So that's one role we can play. And yes, I mean, this is part of the role that EQB staff play from the environmental review side, is helping walk people through the process and understanding the process. So that's another role that we can play, probably better than a handbook, right? Is just to sit down and talk with you about it and answer questions. So we're happy to do that. And like I said, we can connect offline beyond today's meeting and make sure that the right people are kind of brought in the loop. I would also mention that citizen member Julie Gehring has some familiarity with this project and the different parties that are involved. And so she's also potentially a helpful resource for having those conversations.
Good.
Chair Bishop?
Yes.
This is Jerry Van Amberg. I am familiar with the project to a degree since I serve on the flood damage reduction work group in the Red River Valley. This is a project I know that's been talked about, has been presented to the work group. There's been a lot of time spent on it. There is a DNR person that is really a co-chair with the FDR work group, flood damage reduction work group. And I would suggest that he probably is a very good contact. I won't mention his name because I think that's up to Commissioner Stroman, as far as people to get a hold of. But I just suggest that he would be a good person to speak with.
Chair Bishop, this is.
Sure.
I'm sorry, I'm happy to defer. I'll hold my comments.
Okay, I apologize, Chair Bishop. I was just going to respond to that. Frankly, Jerry, I appreciate your suggestion. I know who you're talking about, and I just thought it might be easier to take it offline, so we can make assignments that way. But I think between there and our regional director and some of our other staff, we can help add some clarity to this.
Chair Bishop, this is member Konar Steenberg. I'm looking at a document that I just went on to Google and found. It's called the Citizens Handbook for the Environmental Review Process. It's published by the Environmental Quality Board. The last update to this is April 2017.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So we have one from 2017.
I guess just one parting question for this group. Are there stakeholder guidelines at the local or state level that we could be enlightened by? Because frustrating enough after 5 years of trying to get some sort of granularity, we don't even know what the process is. Like,
Yeah, it shouldn't be a mystery.
and it continues to be. The funding's a mystery. The process is a mystery. Being able to participate in a meeting is a mystery. There's not one part of this that feels right.
Okay. I mean, I think to your point about guidelines, and I think a lot of those are established through the agencies, but I think that's a worthwhile suggestion too to consider. Am I missing something there, Katie, on and Denise, on how the guidelines are set up for participation?
Yeah, I guess if I'm understanding, maybe not understanding the question in particular, and I guess what I'm hearing is just a general frustration that these processes are hard to navigate. It's not clear. You know, you go and I can't remember the name of a colleague of yours I spoke with on the telephone yesterday, and it was very thoughtful that he reached out and just said, I don't understand how we make public comment tomorrow. How does this work? How can you help me? And that was great. And he said, we go to these different forums and we don't know, each one has slightly different norms and slightly different ways of operating. And, I get it. It is not clear. It is not transparent. There are different, different operations at different boards if you're going to local government versus state government. And it's on all of us to make that better and to improve that. This is something we think about at EQB, and to be very transparent, there's not enough time in the day to spell out all the answers to everybody's questions, and we're trying to get there, but what we can offer is pick up the phone, call us. We will do our best to help from EQB to help make those things transparent, to talk to you human to human and navigate these processes, because I empathize as a fellow person, and we talk to people within government too that are sometimes, how do I get from point A to point B? So pick up the phone, call us, we'll work with you and see what we can do.
Great, thank you, everybody. Does anybody else have additional comments just about what we've heard from this public participant today? And hi, and welcome to Commissioner Roberts Davis. Glad you're here.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry for being just a little bit late. I apologize for that.
That's okay.
Thanks for having me.
Anyone else? No?
Hi, Commissioner. This is Brian Murdoch.
Hi, Brian. Go ahead.
Just because I'm so unfamiliar with this project, you mentioned something about maybe some follow-up. I think that would be great to understand after we work through this to help this individual just to get a rundown on how it all came to play and if there's anything we do differently. It sounds like an interesting situation.
Yeah. Thank you.
From our side, we would be happy and very welcoming to have that sort of exchange and engagement. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Giuseppe, do we have other commenters at this point?
Chair Bishop, no, at this point, no one's indicated that there's a desire to make additional comments.
Okay. So with that, we're running a little bit ahead of schedule. Unless anyone else on the board has any additional comments. Then if not, we'll move on to our next agenda item, as I see that Aditya is available and here already, so that we could turn it over to Adi unless, I'll pause though, unless there's other comments from our board. Okay, hearing none, let's move on to the next agenda item, our quadrennial energy report for Minnesota. So the Department of Commerce prepares this report outlining key energy sector developments and every 4 years. And we're really pleased that they can be here today to outline the highlights from the report. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Aditya Renati, Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Commerce. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair Bishop, and it's an honor to present the findings of the Quadrennial Energy Report to Environmental Quality Board and attending members of public. So if you can advance the slide, Giuseppe. So Minnesota Department of Commerce, our mission is to protect the public interest and advocate for Minnesota consumers across a range of industries, including energy, insurance, banking, to name the major ones. Next slide, please. So I already mentioned some key ones, some others that I missed, weights and measures, telecom. So you will encounter Department of Commerce multiple times in your day, whether you're filling gas at the pump or if you're turning on your light bulb. We help regulate all those industries. In particular, the Division of Energy Resources, next slide, please, is tasked with promoting clean, reliable, and affordable energy. And those three are not trade-offs with each other. We can achieve all three, as I'm going to show in this presentation today. So we have a regulatory role assisting the Public Utilities Commission on rates and planning issues. We have a legislative roles, a legislative role as an extension of the administration. And we also have a role in administering the federal programs in the area of energy equity, specifically energy assistance and weatherization. Next slide. So Minnesota State Energy Office is really leading the charge in putting this report together. Of course, we have had input and assistance from other parts of commerce, even other agencies such as PCA and PUC, to name a couple of major contributors. Next slide. So Quadrennial Energy Report is produced every 4 years. It outlines key developments in the energy sector with a particular emphasis on power generation and building energy efficiency, because those are areas that are more in the purview of a Department of Commerce. This is to meet the requirements under 216C.18, but we have redesigned it for easy access so that important energy information can be accessible to the board members as well as public at large. So I encourage everyone to go to min.gov/commerce and access the energy data dashboard. Next slide. So before I share the 4 or so major conclusions from this report, let's take a look at the total energy picture of Minnesota, which is about 1.9 trillion BTUs of primary fuel, and it's used in a variety of end uses. Electricity generation, which is a sector that Commerce regulates along with the Public Utilities Commission. And then in addition to that, there is transportation, and then building energy consumption, some of which comes from electricity, as you could see, but a lot of it also comes from natural gas, given our climate. You'll also notice that we use only 42% of the energy. Rest is waste heat or other types of waste. So there's a lot of room for energy efficiency. Although, as you will see in the presentation, we are already ranked number 9 in the country as far as energy efficiency is concerned. Next slide. So my message number 1 is, in the power generation sector, coal is dropping significantly, renewables are expanding quickly, and overall the share of carbon-free electricity, next slide, is now at a 55% in 2020. And that's a significant percentage increase from 30% in 2005. Coal, which is the most carbon intense of all fossil fuels, coal's share in power generation is down from 62% to 25%. And in the subsequent slides, we're going to see the impacts on greenhouse gas emissions and what exactly is leading to this demise of coal. Next slide. This is just a more granular picture of how things have changed over the last 20 years. Next slide. If you take a closer look at renewables, you will see that wind commands a lion's share, 21.4, but solar is rising rather rapidly. If you look at the queue of solar projects in the Midwestern ISO region, you'll see multiple gigawatts of solars in the next 20 years. Next slide. And most of the emissions reductions in the electric power sector have come from utilities retiring coal-fired electricity. So 2 factors have contributed to this. One is obviously our renewable electricity standards and our Next Generation Energy Act goals. And next slide. If you can move actually a couple of slides, Giuseppe, that would be great. One more, please. It's really the economics of solar and wind, which is very, very competitive now. So if you look at, these are Lazard's survey of electricity prices nationwide. These are not Minnesota specific numbers, but the numbers in Minnesota are very much in line with these trends. So you will see that utility scale solar, utility scale wind is already cheaper than even operating existing, certainly cheaper than new coal power plants, and oftentimes cheaper than operating even existing coal power plants. And solar is well on its way there at utility scale, although at the residential and community level, it's more expensive. Next slide. So it's really a combination of economic and regulatory and legislative factors that has led to this success story where power sector emissions have reduced by 29% between 2005 to 2018. And actually, if you count 2020, that reduction is 40%. So this on the backdrop of industrial, residential, commercial emissions rising, it presents us a dual challenge. We cannot sit on our laurels in the power sector. We have to decarbonize more quickly since these technology pathways already exist. That's why Walz-Flanagan administration has announced in its clean energy package 100% carbon-free electricity standard by 2040. That then can lead to further decarbonization of the buildings and transportation sectors. Next slide. So the power sector has led these reductions, and with intensifying that is only going to help our overall goals. Next slide. So if you look at the carbon intensity in terms of CO2 equivalent emissions per megawatt hour, 20 years ago, Minnesota was quite a bit higher than the national average, but we have caught up very, very quickly. And in 2020, we have dipped just below the national average. Next slide. So we really appreciate the leadership that electrical utilities here have shown, and even without any additional legislative action, we can see that their existing plans, integrated resource plans in case of regulated utilities or other publicly disclosed information, we already have a pathway to 70% carbon-free electricity by 2034. Next slide. And we cover a variety, we have a variety of electrical utilities in the state, and this decarbonization is really across the board among all large utilities, including Xcel, Otter Tail Power, Minnesota Power, among investor-owned utilities, and Great River Energy, who had recently announced a plan to close their Coal Creek plant and replace that with nearly a gigawatt of wind. Those are great stories. Next slide. So when we put all that information together and put numbers against that for these four major utilities, Xcel, GRE, Minnesota Power, and Otter Tail, we see that the percentage of coal in the upper Midwest, including Minnesota, but this goes beyond Minnesota, will drop from 48% to 21%. And since climate change is a global problem, we should care about what's going on, and we import about 10% of electricity. So I think taking this whole upper Midwest view is critical. And you see a significant jump in wind as well as solar here. Next slide. So I already mentioned the leadership shown by Xcel, Great River Energy, Minnesota Power. In addition to the economics, favorable economics of renewables, these companies have their own carbon reduction goals prompted by their members in case of GRE, shareholders in case of Xcel and Minnesota Power, and their own corporate responsibility goals. Next slide. Oops. So leading on top of this ownership, leading on top of this utility leadership is a desire by large corporations like Google and 3M, Target, and Ecolab, their own goals of either carbon-free or renewable electricity goals. And we have found that these Minnesota's cleaner grid is actually an attractive factor for these businesses either to stay or to locate here. Next slide. So when we monitor what's the carbon emission factor on a utility basis, we see that we still have a long way to go, but we see the trends as favorable. If you just take one example, Xcel, these are 2019 numbers. If you look at the 2020 estimate of CO2 emissions, it has already dropped below 700 due to the seasonal dispatch of their coal power plants. Next slide. So decarbonization is not the only thing that we care about. We also care about affordability, reliability. So on the right-hand side here, you see the supply and price trends of propane. Next slide. You see here our view of the recent price spikes in natural gas that occurred in February and how they compare to the previous trends. So we have information on supply security and affordability in the Quadrennial Energy Report on these fossil fuels as well. So we understand how these things intersect with each other. Next slide. So as regulators of the gas industry, we don't regulate propane, but we do regulate gas. We oversee the expenditures by rate-regulated utilities, and so as to keep the rates reasonable for our Minnesota consumers. Next slide. Here's a more granular view of propane that you saw earlier. Next slide. You may have deduced from the overall greenhouse gas emissions slide that our greenhouse gas emissions from buildings is rising. So in this report, we outline how we can make it better over the next 2 slides. So the first of which, next slide, Giuseppe, is a pathway to reducing emissions from our electric sector. So we project that over this decade, we can reduce 33% of our electric load through cost effectiveness efficiency measures. So this is not just a reduction for the sake of reduction. We have a specific payback period and cost effectiveness associated with it. Next slide. This translates over to natural gas too. We can save 14% of our natural gas through cost-effective efficiency measures by the end of this decade. Next slide. In addition, we can accelerate the emissions reductions by adopting more aggressive building energy codes in a successive fashion over the next 15 years. And this was the conclusion of our buildings report, a joint work between Department of Labor and Industry and Department of Commerce. And building on that report, House Energy Committee Chair Long has a bill in Congress to transition our building energy codes and put them on this path of net zero by 2036. Next slide. Even in absence of a building energy code, aggressive code like that, which we would of course love to have, we have already had success in increasing our energy efficiency over the last 10 to 15 years through the Conservation Improvement Program, which has resulted in boost to GDP, creation of jobs, and saving money across all customer classes. Next slide. So we want to build on top of the success of Conservation Improvement Program by including load management and efficient fuel switching. You saw projections earlier that the penetration of renewables is increasing. Almost all of those renewables are intermittent in case of Minnesota, so we're going to need more load management, more flexibility. So this is what this bill aims to create. Next slide. A key portion of affordability is the burden on resource constrained households. So we monitor the energy burden in line with a goal under 216C.05, which states 5% as a goal for all Minnesotans. We're doing well on average. We're 2% on average, which is great, but the more vulnerable among us, those percentages are 8% or in some parts of the state, even 15 or 20%, as the next slide will show. Next slide, please, Giuseppe. So you'll see a great variation in that energy burden across Minnesota. We're doing relatively well in Twin Cities, but in greater Minnesota, these percentages are look at that northwest angle or look at close to Mille Lacs or Brainerd area, very, very high percentages in terms of the energy burden. So we clearly have a long way to go here. Next slide. So we help in two different ways here. Energy assistance and weatherization. Both of these are federally funded programs that we administer. And we fund all kinds of fuels here, right? As you can see, for heating, including fossil fuels. And 2/3 of this assistance goes towards greater Minnesota, just because the energy burden is higher in those areas. Next slide. Weatherization, we work with 23 providers, service providers, and we monitor very closely how that maps with the energy burden percentages in different parts of the state. But the fact is that we have a minuscule level of funding, and at this level of funding from the federal government, it would take nearly 300 years to weatherize all eligible Minnesota households. Next slide. So we are also engaging climate smart cities and municipalities to take steps for energy efficiency on their own. So we can accelerate this process. We have other proposals out there that are part of governor's budget, such as the pre-weatherization work, healthy air, that has benefits for indoor air and health, in addition to qualifying those homes for weatherization programs. So in summary, next slide. We have a number of climate and energy goals that are rather ambitious for these different communities, Minneapolis, St. Paul, but even some in greater Minnesota, such as Grand Marais. So by working with these cities in partnership with them, in our role as a convener for these goals of affordability, reliability, and cleaner sources of energy, we are able to help them. I think that's the end of my prepared presentation. Hopefully that gave you a flavor of the type of information in this quadrennial report, and broadly the work that Department of Commerce does in this area. So at this point, I'm happy to conclude the presentation and take any questions.
Great, thank you so much. At this point, does the board have any comments, questions, or discussion? We appreciate the update, Adi, on this.
Certainly, my pleasure, Chair.
Yeah. And the close work you're doing with the whole climate subcabinet and all of the agencies that you talked about, kind of that bridge this too. Does anybody have questions from the board?
Chair, I have a question about the very first figure, which shows the energy consumption in Minnesota. It was in 2018. All the gray that's unused energy, or they call it rejected energy. It's really waste. Is that right?
That's correct.
When I look at that, how did they come up with 57%? I come out with a higher percentage. I'm just wondering what I'm overlooking or underlooking.
So your question is, let's see, I'm pulling that figure up on my.
Yeah, the rejected energy, I think, is like 1186.
1186.
And the energy that was used, that actually did work, was 661. And you have an overall then of 1857 trillion BTUs. How did they calculate, or how was you calculate the waste then, or the efficiency of that? I would think it would be lower than 57%.
Yeah, so there are significant losses in transportation, and there's also the question of imports. So we have net imports, so that accounts for that difference.
Okay, that's maybe what I'm not looking at is the imports, which I didn't see up there.
Yeah, we import about, I don't have the exact figure. I have to look at the chart for the transportation fuels, but we import about 13% of the electricity in the state too.
Well, this is a very informative report. I found it extremely interesting. We shouldn't have our rose-colored glasses on as we look at this because I think it's very concerning as to where we are at and where we want to get to. And when we look at the scorecard or the grade card that was put out just most recently by a group of environmental organizations, it was not very good. We don't score high in Minnesota on a lot of areas. So I think it just points out that we need to do many things. We have to be very tough in reducing greenhouse gases. If there's anything we can do to get that done, we need to do it. Every project that we look at, I think I've come to the conclusion, we have to look at how we can reduce those. What is the possibility? And I guess we're talking about that now in the state, but I think this points out even more so the need to do that. But thank you for the report. Very good.
Certainly, one chart that didn't make it here that I want to point out, and we're certainly the reason we put this information out there is so that we can look at it in a data-driven way. We already saw the progress in power sector emission reduction. One contribution to that is our change in the mix, but the other contribution is the efficiency. So we are actually American Council for Energy Efficient Economies came out with their rankings, and in 2019 they ranked Minnesota number 9. And two very interesting metrics: electricity savings as a percentage of sales. They ranked number 9, just like the overall ranking. But on natural gas savings as a percentage of sales, we were number 1. So I think we can build on that through by passing the Energy Conservation and Optimization Act. And energy efficiency on natural gas not only helps in driving down emissions, but it helped us immensely during the polar vortex situation by keeping our supply secure because we use it more efficiently.
Chair, if I could, this is Steve Grove from DIADI. Great presentation, a lot here to reflect on. I'm curious, as you look at the carbon-free sources of energy in Minnesota, where most of your optimism lies. What do you think are going to be the really key technologies and key sources that we should most focus on in the coming decade to reach some of the goals that you've outlined here?
Certainly. So number one, in order to continue decarbonizing the power sector, we have to invest in long duration energy storage, all kinds of energy storage, but particularly long duration. And we have an exciting pilot from Great River Energy in piloting redox flow, a redox flow battery that can last 150 hours. We at the Department of Commerce are going to undertake a study of the potential for long duration energy storage. But this, in terms of technology maturity, this is at an early stage. So we have to try a number of things and also take the help of federal grants where it makes sense. The second such area is hydrogen production. We have a number of interesting pilots, some of which are federally funded in the state. Department of Commerce is also interested and will soon issue a request for proposal around hydrogen production from wind and solar. So that will be critical not only in increasing the usage of these renewable energy sources when they're not needed on the electric grid, but it also will help decarbonize the thermal sector, which is the next challenge.
Great, that's exciting. I mean, I think in addition to these new technologies and the growth there, I'll just say for the board's visibility that, myself and other commissioners on this call are really eager to work with Commerce and others on community energy transitions, as Adi brought up some of the communities that, are transitioning off of coal and looking for new opportunities, whether that's data centers or other economic development opportunities. This is something where a lot of agencies working together can make a difference. And that's an area of focus for us in the coming months through our Minnesota Business Vitality Council too. So thanks for this presentation. Really eager to work with you on it.
Likewise, Commissioner Grove.
Deputy Commissioner Renata, this is Nick Martin. I have an excellent presentation. There's so much great data in here. And I think one of the things that your presentation made really clear is that, electricity is headed in a good direction, at least, for quite a while because of the economics of renewables. And, we're just, whether you look at it as carbon free or the share or carbon intensity, that's moving in a good direction. What seems more challenging is you really see the increase in emissions from the building sector. And natural gas is, a very affordable way to provide a lot of heat in a cold climate. And so there's increasing conversations around, what is the portfolio of solutions that we use to address those emissions? And I'm just curious for your thoughts for what some of the things that Commerce is thinking about might help bring that down.
Certainly. So some of the things that we're thinking about are on the technology side. Some are on regulatory process side, and both are essential. I would argue the success in power sector decarbonization is due to the economics of renewables, but it's also because of regulatory processes such as integrated resource plan. They're onerous, they're challenging, as you know and we know. But they help compare different resources with each other on social cost of carbon, on economics, and help utilities make the most efficient choices. A process like that on the thermal side would help immensely. So that's on the regulatory side. And on the technology side, how we decarbonize natural gas, we have three categories of options. One is beneficial electrification, and that's part of energy conservation and optimization. We have less carbon intense electricity. Let's use it where it makes sense. Number two is hydrogen, as I pointed out, and the potential for replacing some of this natural gas with hydrogen. And then number three are, other sort of new technologies like renewable natural gas, particularly if it comes from dairy, can reduce the carbon emissions. But these are new technologies, and they need to be evaluated. So early stages on the thermal side, but hopefully a combination of these technological and regulatory changes can put us on the right path.
Kristen Tellefson, great charts. These are really accessible, great charts. I had a question about the community energy opportunities and distributed generation. I didn't see much data on that. Can you fill in a bit, or is there a different place to look for that?
Yes, so we of course encourage distributed generation through community solar gardens and other programs. We oversee Excel Solar Rewards program, for example. But in the coming year, we're going to take a very systematic look at the value of distributed generation for resilience. So we're going to take a wider view of energy assurance beyond delivered fuel, include the power sector. So stay tuned. We're going to do more systematic study of where is power grid reliability in various parts of the state at the end of the line or at close to critical loads such as hospitals, and can distributed generation play a role there?
Thank you. And the hosting capacity map or whatever that was analysis that was just done, will that feed into the distributed generation?
Most certainly. So really the value of distributed generation, and we have continue to work on value of solar, as you may have followed our work at the mission. It's time and location specific. So that's the foundation for.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for all your comments. Anybody else have questions on the board? No? Okay. Well, great. Thank you so much, Deputy Commissioner Renate. We appreciate your being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great. So we will close that out and move on to our next agenda item. We're right back on schedule now. So good discussion. I'm glad we had time for that. So next discussion item is, and informational item is the mandatory category report project overview. And I would like to introduce Eric Cedarleaf Dahl, who is going to present this. Eric?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair and members of the board, the purpose of this agenda item is to brief the board members on the planned approach for the legislatively directed mandatory category report. As a reminder, this report was first completed in 2013 and also in 2018 and used to be required every 5 years, but in 2018, the legislature changed it to be required every 3 years. So it was completed in 2018 and now we're completing it in 2021 and then the next one will be 2024. So next slide, please. Okay, so mandatory categories, just a reminder to orient the board, what are they? They're categories of project types that define when review is required and assigns responsible government unit who will conduct the review. And then there's, as you know, environmental assessment worksheets or EAW categories, and then environmental impact statement categories or EIS categories. All right, this will be a pretty quick overview just to keep moving to other presentations. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, it's a legislatively directed report from 116D.04 subdivision 5B. And there's some required content, and the top here is the required content, which is to assess the intended historical purpose of the category, assess whether projects that fall within the category are also subject to local, state, or federal permits, and assess and do an analysis of and recommendations for whether the mandatory category should be modified, eliminated, or unchanged based on its intended outcomes in relationship to existing permits and other federal, state, or local laws and ordinances. So that's the required components of the mandatory category report. It's due December 1st, 2021. With this current mandatory category report, we're going to do an additional assessment, and we're past mandatory category reports focused on completing the legislative directive of assessing each mandatory category for environmental review in Minnesota Rules 4410. For the 2020 version, we're going to look at doing an assessment of environmental justice in mandatory categories. And we're still working through what that means, and some of it will be related to the next couple of slides on input process. We wanted to look at, how should categories, or how can we look at categories and how they relate to environmental justice, and doing an assessment of what that looks like. So the next slide, please. And so we're continuing to develop the project plan for the input process. Some of our preliminary approaches include using a variety of methods to get feedback on mandatory categories. These include reviewing input received during the past mandatory category reports and the recent EQB mandatory category rulemaking. We'll have an open public input period, likely in May of 2021. And then we'll also be soliciting input from state RGUs and local government units, and targeted interviews with local government unit staff, and also targeted interviews with environmental justice thought leaders. And we're currently developing a project plan for this input process, but if you have any ideas, I would definitely welcome them. And so then next slide, please. So what are our next steps? We're currently identifying interagency representatives and setting up periodic meetings to provide input on mandatory categories. We're developing a detailed project charter and timeline. We're compiling data and reviewing historical recommendations based on the past mandatory category reports and the past rulemakings. We're currently developing a project plan for input process, which I talked about in the last slide, which is outreach to local governments, a public comment period, and targeted interviews with environmental justice thought leaders. And then we're also beginning analysis of environmental review mandatory category data. We'll be using a lot of what you'll hear in Katrina's presentation later today from the performance report on environmental review. And then we'll develop a draft outline of the report, and we will be back to present to the board before our legislative due date on December 1st, 2021. And like I said, I'd keep it pretty short, and that's all I have. And let me know if you have any questions. Next slide. Thank you very much for the opportunity to give you an update on what we're working on. And hopefully you didn't hear my children screaming in the background because they're schooling from home today and they're playing with Legos, I think.
We all seem to have noisy coworkers around here. My dog seemed to be barking a lot earlier today. No, thank you. Great, thank you for that. Anybody on the board have questions on this item? Or any discussion?
Commissioner, this is Jess Richards, Assistant Commissioner with the DNR, here now on behalf of Commissioner Stroman. Just one clarifying question I guess I would ask is, does this give us an opportunity at all to look at whether there are new categories for areas where we might feel that, you know, we need better coverage or to be addressed, or is it just looking at the existing categories?
Madam Chair, Board Member Richards, thanks for the question. I think what we've discussed so far as a team is, yes, we would welcome looking at new areas for coverage or new areas for mandatory categories.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I know one area that this board has talked about in the past and we found very challenging is dealing with things like the Pineland Sands area and those kind of emerging larger areas that aren't necessarily conducive. We haven't been able to do a big study on, and we haven't been able to get funded on, and so we have to figure out some way to manage those sort of things. And so it'd be just interesting to see how that plays out. Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion on this one? No? Okay, thank you. Thanks so much, Eric, for
thank you.
Going over this for us, and appreciate the work. We'll move on to our next agenda item, which is preliminary results from the Pollinator survey and interagency pollinator protection team. So our presenter is Rebecca Gutierrez Moreno, and I will turn it over to Rebecca to present and give us a little background.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can everyone hear me?
We can.
Making
Welcome.
sure. Perfect. And good afternoon, members of the board and the public. My name is Rebecca Gutierrez Moreno, and I'm the State Pollinator Coordinator with the Environmental Quality Board. And I'm here representing the Interagency Pollinator Protection Team, in short, the IPPT, to present the preliminary results from the pollinator survey and the next steps that the IPPT is discussing. Next slide, please, Denise. Thank you. First, I want to give just a brief background. This work is based on the Executive Order 1928. The EQB directed the IPPT to develop a civic engagement process to ensure public participation, build cross-sector relationships and partnerships, identify and support opportunities for statewide collaboration to conserve imperiled pollinators. Additionally, the board tasked the IPPT to seek feedback from Minnesotans on the 2020 Minnesota State Agency Pollinator Annual Report. Next slide, please. Thank you. Therefore, the IPPT developed a survey to first gather feedback on the 2020 Pollinator Report, but also to hear from the public about the actions they are taking to protect pollinators and learn and understand the barriers that they may be encountering in that process. Next slide, please. So who participated in the survey? We had 623 respondents. In this pie chart, we can see that the majority identified as Minnesota residents, followed by government employees, civil servants, and beekeepers. However, we also had some representation from other demographics like corn, soybean growers, and educators. Additionally, we received 2 emails with feedback on the report and 1 letter from the Red River Valley Sugar Beet Growers Association describing their efforts to protect pollinators. This is a small sample of the people that live in Minnesota, and everyone who invested their time and effort to answer the survey, we really appreciate them. So also, this is the first effort that the IPPT is conducting to hear from Minnesotans on the annual report and also on their actions and challenges that they may be facing to help pollinators. Next slide, please. About the preliminary results, first I'm going to talk about what we have learned so far on what respondents said about the annual report. We asked the public to rate their familiarity with the report before taking the survey. As you can see in this graph, the majority of respondents indicated that they were not at all familiar with the report. The x-axis shows the percentage of respondents that chose each answer. Interestingly, almost all respondents, even though they haven't seen the report, they indicated that they know or have some knowledge about pollinators and how to help them. Next slide, please. Individuals who responded to be very or somewhat familiar with the report were then directed to answer report-specific questions. The majority rated the report to be informative about the status of pollinators and pollinator issues in the state. Next slide, please. Additionally, the majority of respondents indicated that the report scorecards are helpful to understand progress toward pollinator protection goals and desired outcome. And also they agreed that the recommendations included in the report in each section of the report to move progress forward are tied to those goals. Next one, please. The survey provided space for respondents to write the efforts and challenges they considered were missing from the report. The IPPT identified themes to process the answers we received. For efforts, 91% of survey respondents agreed that the report does a good job including efforts to protect pollinators in the state. However, some of them thought that there were some efforts that could have been included as well. Here I'm presenting common themes that we identified from their answers. Efforts by other individuals and organizations, available educational, financial resources, information on diverse pollinators and their needs, and also the complexities of pesticide or integrated pest management use. Next one, please. About challenges, 81% of respondents agreed that the report does a good job listing the challenges associated with protecting pollinators in Minnesota. Nevertheless, some of the respondents also included challenges they considered were missing. Here are some of the common themes we have identified so far. Informing and educating people or raising awareness, agriculture-related, pesticides, local regulations and restrictions related to the perfect lawn point of view. The IPPT is discussing this feedback as we consider restructuring this year's pollinator report. Additionally, these results have given us a glimpse into who are we reaching with the report. So we're also talking about how to strategically improve our communications with the public. Next one, please. The last section of the survey asked the public to indicate what actions, if any, they are conducting to help pollinators. In this graph, you can see the top 5 actions respondents are taking to help pollinators. People were able to choose more than one option. So we see that most people responded that they have added Minnesota native pollinator-friendly plants to their gardens or their green spaces, that they're maintaining outdoor spaces with pollinator protection in mind. Also, they're spreading the message about pollinator protection in their circles of influence. They are also saying that they choose pesticides that are lower risk to pollinators, and some people also answer that they practice an integrated pest management framework. Next one, please. Finally, survey respondents were asked to share barriers they have encountered in their efforts to protect pollinators and ideas of how we can help them. We also identified common themes among the answers we received, and as you can see here, they are closely linked. For example, some respondents shared that the initial cost of implementing pollinator habitat in their land can be too high. They then shared ideas about creating programs that can help with habitat installation costs. This information can help the IPPT identify potential opportunities for action as we discuss our plans to move progress forward. Next slide, please. So what is next? These are some of the questions that the IPPT is discussing. How do the survey results compare to other information we have about public engagement and pollinator protection? How do the survey results from inform IPPT as we identify priority strategies and actions? Do we need to further investigate any of the issues raised in the survey results? Are we asking the right questions, right? Next slide, please. Our immediate next steps include continue reviewing survey results to identify priority actions for individual agencies and for interagency activities. As I mentioned before, also to structure the 2021 Pollinator Annual Report to consider public feedback. We don't want to lose sight of our North Star. Our desired outcome is that we would have healthy, diverse pollinator populations that sustain and enhance Minnesota's environment, economy, and way of life. We need to keep this in mind as we think strategically about our next steps for both our pollinator protection goals and our civic engagement framework. And next slide, please. This is my presentation today. Thank you, and let me know if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate that, Rebecca. Does anybody have any questions for Rebecca on the current status of the survey and the results here?
I think you mentioned this. I might have missed it too and everything, and thanks for you know, bringing stuff in and we promote it to some groups, and I think we do a better job as Department of Ag of presenting it. But what will be the process then? So you're going to look at the report or how the report's structured, but then the idea to do the survey again the same timing next year, or to kind of look at results or see how we improve that?
Thank you, Commissioner Peterson. That's a really good question. As we are going through the answers, that we received from the public, we are, kind of dividing and conquer. We have structured IPPT into different sub-teams or action groups to tackle each one of the sections of the report, and then, go deeper into each one of the areas. And as we consider that, we're also exploring ways to incorporate people who participated and experts in those different areas into the process of the report. So that's something we are considering. And as we do that and we come back to you and present, the 2021 report before our deadline in December 1st, I think our idea is that we will then create another type of feedback process for next year. And, learning from the experience that we had this year, potentially, targeting other audiences that we may not have reached this year.
Thank you. And sorry, one more question. Was there anything after it went out or with the meeting with the team and everything that asked or something that you felt like maybe would be, or just curious about that too, if there's anything that you would do a little differently just off the top of your head or the group?
I think this is definitely our first exercise doing this process, right? So one of the things that we all are concerned about in the IPPT is that we bring elements of diversity and inclusion into this work as well. So I think one thing we want to explore is to how can we bring unrepresented demographics into the table, and that's something that we're definitely exploring to see how we can incorporate those voices as well into the table.
Thank you. That was another piece I wanted to ask about, so thank you for covering that.
Thank you, Commissioner Peterson. I hope those answers were satisfactory.
Rebecca, this is Jerry Van Amberg.
Hi, Jerry.
Good afternoon. I wanted to mention and give congratulations for the Environmental Initiative Award that was given to the pilot project Lawns to Legumes. I know that not maybe directly in this report, but you certainly had a role in that. And I think it is something that has drawn attention to the concern of pollinators that we have about pollinators. And I hope that maybe the legislature will recognize that putting a little bit of money in a program like that can go a long ways in urging people to do something. So congratulations.
Thank you, board member. Definitely those congratulations go to the Bowser. I think Dan Shaw and his team have done a great job with the Lawns to Legumes program, and that's a program that was highlighted throughout the survey. Definitely people put it down as an example of a successful program that can bring, that is tackling different goals at the same time, bringing awareness and helping people with, covering some financial costs into, incorporating habitat and teaching people how to use integrated pest management to manage their gardens, and just bringing that awareness as well. So yeah, I would really, I think that congratulations definitely is very deserved to Bowser.
Well, I was not thinking of just Bowser, but I think that, it does show that with some education and bringing these concerns to the public, we get some really good benefit from that. And this pollinator report is one way of doing that as well, getting people to look at it, see what the problems are, and see what they may be able to do personally.
Yes, thank you.
Rebecca, this is Jess Richards again at the DNR, and just really kind of building, I guess, off of the last comment. Commissioner Stroman asked me just to ask the question kind of more broadly of, is there anything more we should be doing with respect to public engagement on pollinators beyond the report, in the sense that we seem to have a lot of information available and people don't always find it well. And so, is there other efforts we should be doing where we're coordinated together, like we do on Clean Water Fund or other things, to try to proactively share information?
Thank you, Mr. Richards. I think that is a great question, and that's something that we are discussing at the IPPT. We have representatives from DNR definitely that are very proactive in this subject. And one thing that we got from the public that I think I mentioned it a little bit, but is the fact that we need to be better communicators of what resources are already there. A lot of people don't know maybe that that certain things already exist and they can access them. So we need to be strategic into how do we do that? How do we increase our communication and the visibility of the things that exist so that people can access to that? So yeah, I guess I am recognizing that that is an excellent question, and that's something that we are discussing with the team about how can we do that. Yeah.
Yeah, no need to have the solution today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. And do other board members have questions, comments, feedback?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Christine Tollefson. With reference to the discussion you just had with Mr. Richards, I'm wondering, where does that education come from? Does that does that kind of access education, is that an EQB function, or is that where would that be targeted from in terms of programs for better educating the public? Where would that live?
Thank you, Board Member Kristen. So we are talking about, as we are talking about this process is to, one of the ideas is to do more of that promotion of things that exist in EQB's website, on our Pollinator website, to update that website so that, it has links to different resources, that Bowser has, or that MPCA has, or that the Department of Education. We're working, we have a representative from the Department of Education, and he's very, proactive into figuring out what can we do in terms of incorporating pollinator curriculum into into the curriculum, and creating resources for teachers to include into their science curriculum for, summer activities. And, now that things are, there's a lot of still like working from home and teaching from home, that resources for parents as well, so that they can have means and ways to teach their kids, to teach the younger generations, that they can grow up with the knowledge of why this is important, and how they can do, and what they can do to help. And there are other activities that we're planning also to highlight pollinators during Pollinator Week. So there are specific ideas that we're thinking about as an interagency team of, as all together, what can we do? But definitely, each IPP team member is bringing this, ideas for their own agencies, to see how specific agencies can act within their possibilities.
And then you're thinking of centralizing that on the page on the website?
Some of those resources, yes. I mean, we cannot include everything on our website, but definitely we can include the links to important or highlighted and key resources that people can access there.
Thanks so much.
Yes, thank you, Kristen.
Great. Do others have questions? Comments? Thank you so much.
Madam Chair?
Yeah.
This is Sue Vento. Rebecca, I'm from the Metropolitan Council, and this is not a Met Council related question. Many moons ago, I was an elementary school teacher, and then spent many years working with and for teachers at the old MEA in Education, Minnesota. And I am always anxious for us to look for ways to connect the environment to the future generations. And I love what you just said about the work with the Department of Ed. I would also encourage work with the higher ed institutions. They are preparing future activists in environmental sustainability, as well as future science educators, whether they're formally majoring in science, or as elementary teachers are going to be teaching elements of science, and getting to them at the college level, I think, is important as well. So I can't stress it enough. I think that in every area of our work with the environment, we need to be thinking about preschool, K-12, higher ed, and lifelong learning, so that all of us can be better environmentalists, and we don't leave it to agencies and advocacy groups, that it becomes a citizen responsibility and really ingrained in who we are as Minnesotans and Americans. So again, thank you. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Susan. I think that's a great point, and I really take that to heart. And I'll bring it to the team as well for discussion.
Okay, great. Anyone else have any further comments or questions? No. We are launching a youth climate initiative with the schools that's coming up as well, that I think will be kind of exciting. But I love the idea of integrating our youth. And certainly we're going to see that when we work with our ELs too, and continue to. Good. Okay, thanks. Let's move on then to the next agenda item. Thanks so much, Rebecca. Really appreciate the work. Our next agenda item is the Environmental Review Program Performance Report. And we're going to have Katrina Hapka, our Environmental Review Program Coordinator, present on this. And I think this is Katrina's first time presenting to the board. So we want to say welcome and thank you for all your work in this area. And I want to turn it over to you so that you can really just give us an overview of what it is that we're reviewing and then take us through the report. Thanks and welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair Bishop and members of the board. My name is Katrina Hapka. I am the Environmental Review Program Coordinator for the board. Today, I have the privilege to present on the 2020 Minnesota Environmental Review Program Performance Report, which includes data collected in 2020. Next slide. Before I discuss the report, I'm going to provide some background information. The EQB oversees the state's Environmental Review Program, or ER program as you'll hear me refer to it today, as authorized in Minnesota statute and rule. Under these laws, board members have the responsibility for monitoring ER program effectiveness and have the authority to make program improvements. EQB's role is focused on program consistency and assisting governmental units and interested persons with understanding and implementing these rules. On behalf of the board, EQB staff track ER program data primarily through environmental review notices. Next slide. As a reminder, in 2019, we created a data management plan. The data management plan establishes data collection procedures and creates the framework for the performance report. Using the framework established in the data management plan, EQB staff annually produce the performance report. The performance report is intended to provide meaningful interpretation of annual data to assess the effectiveness of the ER program. The performance report also identifies recommendations to improve ER program effectiveness, adjust the data management plan, develop and revise ER program guidance, and inform ER program improvement initiatives. Today, I will be focusing on the 2020 performance report. It is important to note that the data collected as part of the data management plan and assessed in the annual performance report is limited to what EQB staff can reasonably and consistently track on a year-to-year basis. However, these data are just one source of information that EQB uses to understand the need for ER program improvement initiatives. For example, ER program feedback is also collected from board and environmental review implementation subcommittee meetings and education outreach processes. Next slide. The ER program performance report is organized into 3 sections: accountability, efficiency, and transparency, which are thematically aligned with the objectives of the ER program identified in Minnesota Rules 4410 and values expressed in EQB's 2018 strategic plan. The ER program encourages accountability in both public and private decision-making. The ER program reduces delay and uncertainty and eliminates duplication. The ER program provides the public with systematic access to decision makers and provides usable information concerning the potential environmental effects of a proposed project. Next, we're going to review some of the data presented in the report organized by section. Next slide, please. Under the accountability section, we have the frequency of environmental review over the last 6 years by process type. The 2020 data was similar in proportion to previous years for the frequency of types of environmental review. For example, EAWs continue to comprise roughly 77% of all environmental review completed. Also, typically there are a few EISs completed annually. While there is no recommendation tied specifically to this chart, it provides insight on how often each environmental review process occurs on an annual basis, which can be helpful context when thinking about the ER program. Next slide, please. Under the accountability section, these graphs show citizen petition completeness and EAW need decisions for 2012 to 2020. The graph down the left reflects EQB's role. EQB staff receive and review petitions to see if they comply with the signature and content requirements and role and determine completeness. In 2020, EQB received 15 petitions, 9 of which were deemed complete. This number fluctuates annually and is expected. The graph on the right reflects the Responsible Government Unit's role, or RGU. After the EQB determines a petition is complete, the EQB designates a Responsible Government Unit. and forwards the petition to the designated RGU. The RGU receives the petition and makes an EAW need decision. Since 2012, at least one citizen petition has led to a positive need decision for an EAW every year. Citizen petitions provide an opportunity in the ER process for members of the public to encourage accountability of potential environmental impacts of projects that the ER program itself doesn't require. By completing a petition, a member of the public holds decision makers accountable by ensuring they provide information on potential environmental effects of a proposed project. Next slide. From the efficiency section, this chart displays the makeup of user groups who reached out to EQB for environmental review technical assistance. The volume of technical assistance provided by EQB staff increased in 2020 compared to 2019 across all user groups, with approximately 599 points of contact. The volume of technical assistance provided last year reinforces the need to update guidance documents and environmental review web pages to ensure information is effectively and clearly communicated. Next slide, please. Next, we are going to review the transparency section. At the beginning of this year, EQB staff implemented recommendations from the 2019 performance report for metrics used to track and report the effectiveness of ER program transparency. RGUs submitting final decisions on environmental review documents to the EQB monitor were asked to answer questions about the usefulness of the ER process in identifying environmental effects, about the identification of mitigation measures for potential environmental effects, and about public participation that occurred in the ER process. The data collected in 2021 will set the baseline for this information. A full review of the data set will be included in the 2021 performance report next year. Next slide, please. In conclusion, in spite of the COVID-19 pandemic, the environmental review data collected in 2020 for analysis in the annual performance report was comparable to previous years. The data collected helps us understand the effectiveness of the ER program for these metrics and identifies recommendations for ER program improvement. After today's meeting, staff will begin to develop plans to implement the report's recommendation. EQB staff will provide an update on the implementation to the board in spring 2022 while presenting the 2021 annual ER program performance report. Next slide. Thank you for your time this afternoon. My contact information is on the screen if you have questions after today's meeting. Slide.
Great. Thank you so much, Katrina. I appreciate this. Does anybody have questions on this for Katrina right now?
Madam Chair, if we have time, I want to say that how much I appreciate this program. You know, previous to the implementation of this program, we really depended mostly upon rumors and in terms of representing the effectiveness of the EQB Environmental Review Program. So I'm a great fan of the program. And the question I had for you, Katrina, was what is the survey data, or what data do you collect from the public on the third goal of transparency? I'm not sure if there's a public survey. I've never been really clear about that. Where does that data come from?
Sure. So in the 2019 report, the recommendations identified 3 questions to add. Sorry, I'm going to switch screens really quick and bring them up on mine. Denise, if you can go back to those questions, that would be about 3 slides, I believe. In the 2019 report, these areas were identified to be included. And as I mentioned, one of the main ways that EQB staff collect information about the program is through monitor submissions. So these items are being asked currently of RGUs who submit final decisions. In terms of questions, in terms of public, outreach, as I believe Eric mentioned and touched on briefly with the mandatory category report, there will be outreach to members of the public within the program. That's another form of feedback that we are using in the ER program. So while this report may not specifically touch on that metric, there are other items within the ER program that are collecting information.
From the public.
From the public, yes.
And okay. And are there any survey forms that are something that people can find online and fill out if they? I haven't seen any of that. Is there something like that?
Sure. So I can speak a little bit more to that. Right now, we have an environmental review technical assistance survey that we send out and via email to people who reach out to the EQB, whether that is an RGU or members of the public for technical assistance. That's one survey that we have active.
Oh, that's great. Good to know. Thank you.
Great. Do others have comments or questions?
Yeah, this is Member Konar Steenberg. I guess I'm grateful for this presentation. I think it's really useful information, and in particular the table that catches my eye is the one that discusses the frequency of environmental review programs. Environmental review program process types is the title. And what I take from this is that in any given year, and somebody please do correct me if I'm wrong, but in any given year, the number of environmental impact statements is really a tiny fraction of the number of, when compared to the number of environmental assessment worksheets. So for example, in 2020, of all the major governmental actions, of all the major governmental actions in the state of Minnesota in 2020, only 2 of them presented the potential for significant environmental effects, I think is what this chart is telling us. And that surprises me for a number of reasons, but I just want to make sure that I'm reading that correctly.
Sure. Thank you, Public Member Konar Steenberg. So this chart shows final, only environmental review processes are counted when final decisions are made. So what it's showing is that 2 final decision adequacy determinations were made on EISs in 2020. Similarly, 9 AUARs were adopted in 2020. I hope that clarifies a little bit.
So that there are other decisions or other processes ongoing, they're not reflected in that final number because they haven't been completed yet. Is that the
correct? This chart is showing final decisions by process on the documents. So 63 EAWs had EIS need decisions in 2020.
Got it. Thank you for the clarification. Appreciate it.
Are there other questions or comments?
Chair Bishop, I think it's just good to say, and I'm glad that clarification was made. As MnDOT, I know that we have, just a number of EAWs and EISs going on all at once. So I'm glad the clarification was made about the chart. Sometimes those processes take, in a case of any sort of transportation project, can take anywhere from 18 months to 24 months or more. So this chart is not exhaustive of what is happening out there in terms of EAW or EIS.
Yeah, exactly. I'm glad that we're talking about that too, because we're in the same boat at MPCA with a number of things that are ongoing. How does one get that bigger picture if we wanted to get that bigger picture?
That is definitely something that I could pull and get back to you. We do have that information available.
Oh, good. Okay, thanks. Do others have questions or comments? Okay, well, thank you, Katrina. And there's Katrina's contact information up on the screen as well. But just want to say thank you and thanks for all the work that you do in this area, and appreciate your update and leadership. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Okay. We are a little ahead of schedule, but I think we'll end then early. We had a lot of informational updates here today on a variety of topics and quite different topics. So appreciate the information that's been shared and the team's updates. Especially appreciate when we have fellow board members presenting. So it was great to hear too from Commerce on their report and want to see if we can do more of that with engagement from our other agencies going forward. I think that's a good piece for us to, as a board, to just have that visibility into the work that and reports that our agencies are issuing as well. With that, I think that I will ask for a motion to adjourn. So can I get a motion? Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Yep.
So moved.
So moved.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay, hearing no opposition, the motion carries and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you
Madam
all for
Chair?
being here. Yes.
Madam Chair. I'm sorry I didn't get this in earlier. I just want to make a pitch. If you didn't hear Gary Eichton's interview with Vice President Mondale yesterday at noon or last night at 9 on NPR, I'd encourage you to go to nprnews.org and listen to as much as possible. And if you don't have that whole period of time to listen to the last couple of minutes, because Vice President Mondale was not going to let that interview end without making a pitch about the environment. And it's such a call to action for all of us. It just gives me goosebumps to think about it. So I really, knowing everyone's passion for the environment, I encourage you to take a moment to listen to his wisdom. It's great.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And, we didn't mention, obviously, a lot of the state of current events when we started the meeting today, but certainly the passing of Walter Mondale and Vice President Mondale is a big piece. As Minnesotans everyone has a Mondale story, and what an incredible man he and legacy that he's left us with, and especially on the environment. And I can tell you, he was always he and I talked quite a bit, and he was always very supportive of our role as state regulators, but also, certainly we see it, and you've seen it, Sue, but his love of the environment and our great state, of what he feels makes our great state so unique, our lakes and lands and trails and waters here in Minnesota. And I know that if Sarah Sturman was on, but I know Jess is on, they really had great interactions with him when they dedicated the trail out there in his honor as well. And thank you for mentioning that. Of course, too, I think it's important that we mention yesterday and the verdict, and as we talk about the work that we have ahead. I think we all know as state leaders and as individuals in our society that we have roles to play to change this the awful inequities that continue to exist. And we have a role on the environment here and environmental justice as well. And so I hope that we can focus on that and continue to do our work, because these same communities that are impacted by what we've seen in our cities and throughout the state, and policing are impacted by negative pollution. And 93% of our BIPOC communities have air quality that isn't within the health benchmarks here in our state, and that's atrocious. So I think there's so much more that we need to be doing there as well. And it's fitting that it's Earth Day tomorrow and Earth Week this week, that we can, I think, refocus our attention on these matters. So thank you, everyone. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you for those words, Commissioner.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. All right. Thanks to this board. Appreciate it very much.